Hello, Year 8, and welcome back. I hope you all had a lovely half term and are feeling relaxed and refreshed. Okay, so this PowerPoint is lessons 16 and 17, although you might be looking at them individually or you might be looking at them as one. You need to make sure that you have your audio on. You need to make sure that you have a pen and paper to write on, or alternatively a Word document if you're typing. And you need to send your teacher the C's paragraph from lesson 16. This lesson we're going to meet two new characters, Stefano and Trinculo. In Shakespeare's time, The Tempest was described as a comedy. Here are the features of comedy in Shakespeare's time. So it had a happy ending, usually including a marriage. There are no deaths in the play. There is at least one romantic plot, and the plot involves characters who aren't kings, queens, princes, princesses, lords, or ladies. They are servants and tradespeople. These characters get into ridiculous situations. There is confusion around who characters really are. What features of a comedy have we found in The Tempest so far? And from what we've read so far, do you think that the play is a comedy or not? As a little reminder of what's been happening in the plot so far, I've created this handy timeline for you. So the road so far. The play opens, and out at sea there is a ship carrying Alonso, Ferdinand, Sebastian, Antonio, Gonzalo, Stefano, and Trinculo, and it is caught in a storm and about to sink. On an island, Prospero is begged by his daughter Miranda to save the passengers. Prospero then decides it's time to tell his daughter their history, that 12 years ago he was in fact the Duke of Milan, before his brother Alonso conspired with Antonio to overthrow him and cast him and Miranda out to sea. Prospero then uses his magic to send his daughter to sleep, and speaks with his servant, the spirit Ariel, again not to be confused with Ariel from The Little Mermaid, but instead the spirit who he freed from the witch Cyclops. We learn that he had ordered Ariel to create the storm so that his enemies would be washed ashore on their island, separated but unharmed. Miranda awakens and she and Prospero visit Caliban, another servant of Prospero and the son of the dead witch Cyclops. The two berate Caliban for his ungratefulness, and Caliban states that the only thing he is grateful for is that they taught him the language he needed to curse them. Elsewhere, Ariel, invisible, enters playing music, which leads the Prince Ferdinand to them. Miranda and Ferdinand fall instantly in love. The audience learn that this is Prospero's plan, to one day marry his daughter to the prince. However, he decides that he must upset things so that their relationship does not develop too quickly. Prospero accuses Ferdinand of pretending to be the prince and takes him off to prison when Ferdinand raises his sword in complaint. Prospero ignores his daughter's cries for mercy and then sends Ariel off to a mystery mission. There, we're now all caught up. You now have the opportunity for an extension activity to create a storyboard for the events of the play so far. You can even stretch and challenge yourself by including a quotation from the play that best highlights each section in your storyboard. After Prospero sends Caliban to go and fetch wood, Caliban is seen doing this, and he meets two new characters, Stefano and Trinculo. Stefano and Trinculo were also washed ashore at the start of the play. Here is how Stefano and Trinculo are described in the character list. Stefano is a drunken butler, and Trinculo is a jester. I want you to think about these questions. So, what exactly is a butler? What do they do? And why would there be a butler on board Alonso's ship? Likewise, what is a jester? And why would there be a jester on board the ship? A butler is a male servant. He is employed by the head of a house or family. As the King of Naples, Alonso would have had many servants and other people working for him. A butler would be one of the people working for him. A jester is a clown. The jester would have entertained the king and his friends and family on board a long journey. Stefano and Trinculo are low-class characters, and they are servants for Alonso, Sebastian, and Antonio. Stefano and Trinculo are characters we would associate with comedy. Caliban meets these two new characters. He starts off by being scared of them, and he thinks that they're some of Prospero's spirits who have come to torment him. Again, this just goes to show the relationship that Caliban has with Prospero. These stage directions tell you the action that takes place in Act 2, Scene 2. Stage directions tell the actor what to do. It tells them when to enter a scene, in fact even how to enter the scene, and what to do when they are talking and when to leave. You can find this page on page 19 of your booklet that was sent out to you. However, you can also find it on the SharePoint following the link on the slide. You will then need to work through the sheet on page 19 of the booklet. Over the next few slides, I will be reading the entirety of Act 2, Scene 2. You will notice that as you are looking at it, on the left-hand side of the page is the original text, which is what I will read. There is also, on the right-hand side of the page, in a green box, there is a modern version of the text to help you. Act 2, Scene 2. Near Caliban's cave. Enter Caliban with a burden of wood, a noise of thunder heard. All of the infections that sun soaks up from bogs, fens, flats on Prospero fall, and make him by inch meal a disease. His spirit hear me, and yet I need must curse, but thou nor pinch, fright me with urchin shows, pitch me in the mere, nor lead me like a firebrand in the dark, out of my way unless he bid 'em, but for every trifle they are set upon me, sometimes like apes that mow and chatter at me, and after bite me, then like hedgehogs which lie tumbling in my barefoot way, and mount their pricks at my footfall, sometimes am I, all wounds with adders, who with cloven tongues do hiss me into madness. Trinculo then enters the scene. Lo, now lo, here comes a spirit of his, and to torment me, for bringing wood in slowly, I'll fall flat, perchance he will not mind me. Basically, in this scene, Caliban is carrying this sort of like this heavy logs of wood, and he is complaining about how Prospero treats him, and how he's sort of like being misused almost. And then he sort of sees Trinculo, and he thinks that he's some form of spirit that Prospero has sent. Remember, this is a sort of almost deserted island. The only people that are on this island are Caliban, Prospero, Miranda, and Ariel. So he thinks that this is almost like a spirit that Prospero has sent to torment him because he's not sort of collecting the wood fast enough. So instead he tries to hide under his cloak. Here's neither bush nor shrub to bear off any weather at all, and another storm brewing. I hear it singing in the wind. Yon same black cloud, yond huge one, looks like a full bombard that would shed his liquor, if he should thunder as it did before. I know not where to hide my head. Yond same cloud cannot choose but fall by pailfuls. He sees Caliban. What have we here? A man or a fish? Dead or alive? A fish, he smells like a fish, a very ancient and fish-like smell, a kind of not of the newest poor John, a strange fish. Weren't I in England now, as once I was, and had but this fish painted not a holiday fool, there but would be given a piece of silver, there would this monster make a man, any strange beast there make a man, when they will not give a doit to receive a lame beggar. They will lay out 10 to see a dead Indian, legged like a man, and his fins like arms. Warm in my trough, I do not let loose my opinion. Hold it no longer. This is no fish, but an islander, that hath lately suffered by thunderbolt. Alas, the storm has come again. My best way is to creep under his gabardine. There is no other shelter hereabout. Misery acquaints a man with the strange bedfellows. I will here shroud till he dregs of storm be past. And he hides under Caliban's cloak. Basically, Trinculo is sort of like, he's sort of entered and he's looking for somewhere to hide from sort of the storm. And he sees Caliban and he's kind of wondering whether or not this is some sort of, like, if it's human or if it's some sort of creature. And he's saying, if I took this creature back to England, this person back to England, then I could sort of charge people money to look at it because it's kind of almost like a freak. It's really unusual. Okay. Back to the original text. Enter Stefano carrying a bottle and singing. I shall no more to sea, here shall I die ashore. It's a very scurvy tune to sing at a man's funeral. Well, here's my comfort. The master, the swabber, the boatswain and I, the gunner and his mate, love Moll, Meg, Marion and Marjorie. But none of us cared for Kate, for she had a tongue with a tang, would cry to a sailor go hang. She loved not the savour of tar nor of pitch, yet a sailor might scratch her wherever she'd itch. Then to sea, boys, and let her go hang. This is a scurvy tune too, but here's my comfort. Do not torment me, oh. So basically Stefano's sort of like entered and he's just sort of drunk and singing basically. And Caliban, again, sort of like he's seeing the two and he thinks that they're these spirits sent by Prospero to torment him and torture him. What's the matter? Have we devils here? Do you pick tricks upon with savages and men of Ind? Ha! I have not scraped downing to be afeard now for your 4 legs, for it hath been said as proper a man as ever went on 4 legs cannot make him give ground, and it shall be said again, while Stefano breathes at nostrils. The spirit torments me, oh! There is some monster on the isle with 4 legs, who have got, as I take it, an ague. Where the devil should he learn our language, I shall give him some relief, if it be for that, if I can recover him and keep him tame, and take him to Naples with me, he is at present for an emperor that ever trod on neat's leather. Do not torment me, prithee, I'll bring my wood for home faster. He is in fit now, and does not talk after the wisest. He shall taste of my bottle. If he had never drunk wine afore, it will go near to remove his fit. If I can recover him and keep him tame, I will not take too much for him. He shall pay for him that hath and soundly. Thou dost yet but little hurt, thou wilt anon. I know it by thy trembling. Now Prospero works upon thee. Come on your ways, open your mouth. Here is that which will give you language to you. Cat, open your mouth. This will shake your shaking, I can tell you, and that soundly. Caliban drinks and spits out. You cannot tell who's your friend. Open your chops again. Caliban drinks again. I should know that voice, it should be, but he is drowned, and these are devils, oh defend me. 4 legs and 2 voices, a most delicate monster. His forward voice is now to speak well of his friend, his backward voice is to utter foul speeches, but to detract, if all the wine in my bottle will recover him, I will help him argue, come. Caliban drinks. I will pour some in thy other mouth. Stefano! Doth thy other mouth call me? Mercy, mercy. This is a devil and no monster. I will leave him. I will have no long spoon. Basically, Stefano has arrived and sort of like he's seen what he thinks is a monster, which is actually Caliban and Triculo under sort of Caliban's cloak. And Caliban is again sort of like he's complaining, he's thinking that he's being tortured, and Stefano's like, oh, it's a monster that knows our language, but you know, he sort of seems to be going for some sort of fit. I'll give him some of my drink, since it's alcohol. I'll give him some of my drink, and maybe that will sort of soothe him a little bit. And then Trinculo sort of hears Stefano talking and sort of calls out to him. Now, remember, Trinculo, he thinks that Stefano's dead. He thinks that he would have died in the shipwreck. And so Stefano's kind of like, oh my god, this monster knows my name, and thinks that it's sort of like some sort of devil, and sort of like panics a little bit. Basically, Trinculo is sort of saying that he thought that Caliban was sort of dead, and he was sort of like hidden under it, under his cloak. So Stefano actually asks, sort of like, oh, how did you manage to become sort of part of this monstrous shape? Does this sort of like, he calls Caliban a moon calf. It's like, does he basically poop out Trinculos? So he's sort of like trying to be funny here. Okay, back to the original text. So they embrace. Prithee, do not turn me about, my stomach is not consistent. These be fine things, and if they be not spirits, that's a brave god, and bears celestial liquor, I will kneel to him. How didst thou scape? How camest them hither? Swear by this bottle, and how thou camest hither. I escaped upon a butt of sack, which the sailors have overboard, by this bottle, which I made on the bark of a tree, with mine own hands, since I was cast ashore. I swear upon this bottle of thy true subject, for the liquor is not earthly. Here, swear then how thou escapest. Swum ashore, man, like duck. I can swim like a duck. I'll be sworn. Stefano gives the bottle to Trinculo. Here, kiss the book. Though thou cannot swim like a duck, thou art made like a goose. Oh, Stefano, hast thou any more of this? The whole butt, man. My cellar is in a rock by the seaside, where my wine is hid. Caliban. How now, mooncalf? How does thine ague? So, Caliban is basically now, he thinks that Stefano and Trinculo are basically gods, because this sort of like the liquor. So this is probably the first time he's ever had alcohol, and he sort of says that it must be the drink of the gods, basically. So these two must be gods. So I will worship them like gods. So whilst all this is happening, Stefano and Trinculo are kind of sort of like trying to work out how each other survived. So Stefano, he says that he basically floated on a barrel of wine that had been sort of tossed overboard, and Trinculo says that he swam, and he says basically that he can swim like a duck. And Stefano kind of mocks him and says, sort of like, you know, wow, here, have another drink, because you may be able to swim like a duck, but you look like a goose. And Trinculo's kind of asking, you know, have you got any more of this? And Stefano says that he's got the whole barrel, and that he's sort of made up a sort of like a cave by the seaside, and he's kind of like made himself a home there, and he keeps sort of like the barrel there hidden. And then he sort of turns to Caliban and asks him basically if he's feeling any better. Hast thou dropped from heaven? Out of the moon, I do assure thee. I was the man in the moon when time was. I have seen thee in her, and I do adore thee. But my mistress showed me thee, and thy dog and thy brush. Come, swear to that. Kiss the book. I will furnish it anon with new contents. Swear. By this good light, it is very shallow monster. I afeard of him, a very weak monster. The man in the moon, a most poor credulous monster, well drawn monster, in good sooth. I'll show thee every fertile inch of the island, and I will kiss thy foot. I prithee be my god. By this light, a most perfidious and drunken monster. When God's asleep, he'll rob his bottle. I'll kiss thy foot. I'll swear myself thy subject. Come on then down and swear. I shall laugh myself to death at this puppy-headed monster, a most scurvy monster. I could find in my heart to beat him. Come, kiss. But that poor monster's in drink, an abominable monster. I'll show thee the best berries. I'll show thee the best springs. I'll pluck thee berries. I'll fish for thee, and get thee wood enough. A plague upon the tyrant that I serve. I'll bear him no more sticks, but follow thee, thou wondrous man. A most ridiculous monster, to make a wonder of a poor drunkard. So basically, in this bit, Caliban is sort of, he's really like, oh my God, you come from heaven, don't you? You're sort of like this sort of magical, majestic being. And Stefano's like, oh, yes, not from heaven, but from the moon. I used to be the man in the moon. And Caliban's sort of like, oh, I've seen you in the moon and I worshipped you, my mistress. So he's talking about his mother. Remember, because she was a witch and witches would have worshipped the moon. So my mistress showed you in the moon and your dog and your bush. So Stefano's kind of like, so he's drunk and he's kind of like, he's really enjoying this. And he's like, oh, yes, I will be your god. And Trinculo is sort of like saying aside, so he's not saying it to either of the characters, and he's kind of sort of, it's kind of almost like he's thinking out loud, and he's sort of mocking Caliban for basically thinking that someone like Stefano, who's basically calls him like he calls him a poor drunk, and he's basically mocking Caliban for thinking that this poor drunk could possibly be a god. I prithee, let me bring thee where crabs grow, and I with my long nails will dig thee pig-nuts, show thee a jay's nest, and instruct how thee to snare a nimble marmoset. I'll bring thee to clustering filberts, and sometimes I'll go with thee, young scammels from the rock. Wilt thou go with me? I prithee now lead the way without any more talking. Trinculo, the king and all our company else be drowned. We will inherit here. Here, bear my bottle. Fellow Trinculo will fill him by and by again. Farewell, master, farewell, farewell. A howling monster, a drunken monster. No more dams I'll make for fish, nor fetch it in firing at work requiring, nor scrape treacherer, nor wash dish. Ban, ban, Caliban, has a new master, get a new man. Freedom, high day, freedom, freedom, high day, freedom. Ho, brave monster, lead the way. So Caliban is kind of sort of basically been saying, you know, let me be your servant. I'll show you where sort of like where you can grow crops. I'll show you where you can find food and where you can find fresh water. I'll sort of like, I'll help you catch food as well. And just sort of saying basically, you know, you are God, I will do anything for you. And I will sort of like, I'll abandon my former master. So remember Prospero, for you. And then he's sort of like, he's singing to himself. So he's drunken and he's singing and he's really happy that, that these sort of, this god-like creature is going to be taking him away, from Prospero. And he's so happy to become the slave of Stefano rather than the slave of Prospero. As I read through the statements, decide whether or not you believe they are true or false. 1. Stefano hides under the cloak with Caliban. 2. Stefano carries alcohol with him. 3. Stefano thinks that he's found a strange, four-legged creature. 4. Trinculo gives Caliban alcohol. 5. Caliban hates the alcohol and refuses to drink it. 6. Caliban offers to serve Stefano. 7. Caliban feels bad about not serving Prospero anymore. Statement 1 is false. Please mark your answers in red pen. Statement 2 is true. Stefano carries alcohol with him. Statement 3 is also true. Stefano thinks that he has found a strange four-legged creature. Statement 4 is false. It is in fact Stefano that feeds Caliban alcohol. Statement 5 is also false, as Caliban likes the alcohol and drinks it a lot. Statement 6 is true. Caliban offers to serve Stefano. However, statement 7 is false. Caliban celebrates and sings that he is no longer in service to Prospero. This scene is meant to be one of the funniest parts of the play, but can also be seen as a sad moment for Caliban. Make a list of the features of comedy from this scene, and make a second list of the reasons why it is sad for Caliban. Features from Act 2, Scene 2 that are comedic. 1. These characters are low class. It is silly when Trinculo gets under the cloak with Caliban. It is funny when Trinculo insults Caliban. He says Caliban smells like a fish. It is funny when Stefano yanks Trinculo out from under the cloak, and it is also funny when Caliban gets drunk. However, some features suggest that it is also sad for Caliban, such as the fact that he is petrified of Prospero. He is clearly bullied. Trinculo sees Caliban as a monster at first. Trinculo is only interested in bringing Caliban to England as a freak. So what that means is someone that they could sort of put on show almost, and charge money for people to see. Caliban seems glad to be free of Prospero, but he's still a slave. He's just slave for a different master. Again, we could link this back to the ideas of colonialism that we looked at in previous lessons. Shakespeare makes us pity Caliban. We can say that Shakespeare creates pathos for Caliban. So pathos is when a situation makes us feel sympathy or sorrow. Okay, so Shakespeare is making the audience feel sorry for Caliban. Look at how these sentences use the word pathos. Dickens created pathos for Bullseye because he is a vulnerable animal who is subjected to Bill's abuse. Doyle creates pathos for James Ryder when he begs Sherlock Holmes for mercy. And an audience feels pathos for Hermia when she is threatened with death by her father Aegeus. Which of these sentences uses the word pathos correctly? A. The dramatic performance was rich in pathos and left the audience with a teary eye. B. I was overwhelmed by the pathos I felt after visiting the underfunded orphanage. Or C. I felt pathos when I got a better gift than my twin brother. Correct answers are A and B. We're going to look in detail at two of the sort of like quotations from the scene. So the first one is from Trinculo, saying, "Were I in England now, as once I was, and had but this fish painted, not a holiday fool there, but would give a piece of silver, there would this monster make a man. Any strange beast there makes a man." Where he's sort of like saying, "Oh, if only I could take this creature back to England, then I could charge people lots of money to come and see him because he's so unusual and so freakish, that I could sort of, like he says, makes man, so I could become rich basically." So it's sort of showing us this view that they had of the sort of non-white, non-English people, as so he's not looking at him as a person. He looks at him as sort of like this sort of almost creature that he can sort of capture, that he can own and sort of charge people to look at. So it's sort of again linking back to these sort of colonial ideas. The second quotation that we're going to look at is when Caliban is sort of wanting to serve Stefano, and he says, "No more downs I'll make for fish, nor fetching and firing at requiring, nor scrapes trencher, nor wash dish. Ban, ban, Caliban, has a new master, get a new man. Freedom, heyday, heyday, freedom, freedom, heyday, freedom." So again, he's sort of saying, no more will I do these things for Prospero. No more will I sort of like cook for him, or will I catch fish for him, or do dishes, or sort of like look after him. Instead, I'm going to serve a new master. I'm going to serve Stefano instead. And he sort of says, so if we look at the end, the final line of his song, where he sort of repeats this freedom heyday, he's sort of celebrating, he's singing, he's celebrating that he's going into servitude of Stefano instead of serving Prospero, and he's describing that as freedom. So if we think about the fact that that he doesn't understand what freedom actually means. So the question is, how do these two quotations make an audience feel pathos? So remember, pathos means sympathy and sorrow. So how do they make the audience feel pathos for Caliban? Your main written task for this week is to write an analytical paragraph answering this question. How does Shakespeare create pathos for Caliban in Act 2, Scene 2? Remember, pathos means sympathy or sorrow. You can include the fact that Caliban is petrified of Prospero and that he has clearly been bullied by him. The fact that Trinculo sees Caliban as a monster at first, as Trinculo is only interested in bringing Caliban home and displaying him as a freak. And that Caliban seems to be glad to be free of Prospero, but he's still just a slave. He's just a slave for a different master. You're going to have a look at answering this question. You should refer to one of the two quotations that we have looked at. So how does Shakespeare create pathos for Caliban in Act 2, Scene 2? You can use these 3 steps to help you write 2 paragraphs. Step 1. State how Shakespeare presents Caliban. For example, Shakespeare presents Caliban as. Step 2. Provide one of the quotations from Act 2, Scene 2, as we have looked at as an example. And Step 3. Explain how this quotation creates pathos for Caliban, considering the comedy genre if you can. Have a go at writing this, and then we'll have a look at a model answer. Once you have finished, you need to make sure that you check your writing. Are there any run-on sentences? Have you used pronouns clearly and accurately when referring to Caliban and Prospero? Have you punctuated the quotations accurately? And have you checked your spellings? I know a lot of you should also add on the extra, have you used capital letters for Caliban and Prospero, as well as any other names that you have mentioned? Here you have another opportunity for an extension task. This sort of to think, how might a modern audience react differently to the average Shakespearean audience in regards to the character and treatment of Caliban? So thinking about, again, sort of like this idea of colonialism and slavery. So what do you think Shakespeare is trying to say about that? Is he saying that it's a good thing? Is he saying that it's a bad thing? What do we think as a sort of a modern audience where we don't have this anymore? We don't have slaves anymore. Would we see this different to how a Shakespearean audience would, or not? We're now going to look at a model paragraph. So remember the 3 stages: state how Shakespeare presents Caliban, provide one of the quotations from Act 2, Scene 2 we've looked at as an example, and explain how this quotation creates pathos for Caliban, considering the comedy genre if we can. Caliban is presented as gullible because he is delighted in ridding himself of Prospero for a new master. Caliban sings in delight that he has a new master, get a new man. Shakespeare creates pathos for Caliban because he does not know what true freedom is. Even though he is a native on the island, he does not feel his life is worth more than being a slave. The comedic character of Trinculo and Stephano mock and ridicule Caliban, calling him a monster and getting him drunk. As an audience, we pity Caliban because we realise that he won't attain the freedom he seeks. The context of colonialism highlights the ill treatment of natives at the hand of colonisers, which was historically prevalent in the Elizabethan era. Perhaps Shakespeare is drawing attention to the oppression at the hands of the empire. Is there anything you'd like to change or add to your paragraph now? Which of these statements are true? A. Caliban is pleased that he has found a new master. B. An audience might feel pathos for Caliban because he is a slave. C. Trinculo says that Caliban looks like something from a freak show. D. Stephano is a butler. This means he works closely with King Alonso. This makes Stephano a very powerful character. And E. Caliban becomes Stephano's slave because Stephano threatened Caliban with violence. You may want to pause the slide whilst you write down your answers. Once you've answered which ones are true and false, use a red pen to mark your answers. The first 3 statements are true. Caliban is pleased that he has found a new master. The audience might feel pathos for Caliban because he is a slave. And Trinculo says that Caliban looks like something from a freak show. We have now reached the end of lesson 16. You can go straight onto lesson 17 if you wish, or instead you can use your allotted timetabled lesson. Well done, Year 8. You have now completed lesson 16. Remember to send your C's paragraph to your teacher. You did an amazing job. You can now either rest and continue on during your next timetabled lesson, or you can continue on to lesson 17 now.